We do not only tell stories with words, but somehow in our minds, as we are designing or as we are creating the narratives, we are also thinking in terms of images. And as media students, you must realize that words are not enough, nor are words sufficient in being able to convey a message, because the whole effectivity of your material comes from the blending of both the audio and the visual elements of your stories. And this lecture talks about the origins of how these images are embedded in your mind and how these images in turn are redesigned and reprocessed to become ideas and feelings. Stories provide shared memories, as we mentioned before in the previous modules. But then there is one thing which is really quite unique about human beings. What we cannot explain in terms of phenomenon, we humanize. In other words, if there are certain things that we do not understand, the first instinct that we do is we translate whatever it is that we do not understand into images, into ideas, into familiar things which could make what is happening around us comprehensible. Uulitin ko, ha? Let me repeat that. If there is something that somebody does not understand, if there is something that man does not understand because of his limited capacity for knowledge at any given time in the past, what he would do is he would translate these ideas into very human and familiar terms. That is why we have myths and legends. That is why we have in our country the so-called alamats, di ba? The alamat of the piña, the alamat of the banana, in which we analyze these stories as symbols of things which are made familiar from something which we cannot understand. In other words, how do we create these images? How do we make up these stories using familiar images? These images are not taught to us but are already built in our consciousness. Okay, we think in the language of symbols. That's why we have a science called semiology, which is the study of symbols, in which images are meant to trigger emotions and ideas. You'll do some reading about this later on, as I will provide that at the end of this specific module. But the point is that how can you say that we think in terms of symbols? By the very fact that you read means that you are thinking in terms of the symbols of the alphabet. You associate symbols together, and from the symbols you create words, and from the words you create ideas, and from the ideas you create images. I will repeat. The simplest explanation to our capacity to think in terms of symbols is our capacity or our ability to read. The very fact that you put together symbols of letters in the alphabet and turn them into words, and from words they become images in our minds, it means our brains function with the capacity to deal with symbols. For instance, there are also certain built-in images which trigger specific emotions. Whoever taught you that the sheep and the wolf would be symbols of good and evil? These are very anthropomorphic. Anthropomorphic means these are very man experienced and man centered. You associate goodness with the sheep and you associate evil with the wolf because of the characteristics we see in these animals. We interpret their value based on the physical reactions we get upon seeing these animals. Then we translate, okay, these two ideas into, okay, something which is even greater. You put the sheep and the wolf together, and then what you would have is the whole concept of the yin and yang, that in every person there is goodness as well as there is evil. What is simply being said here is that no human being is perfectly good and no human being is perfectly evil, and in all of us there is a yin and yang which creates the chemistry which constitutes the very idea of who we are as unique human beings. Then there are also images which we tend to associate from some unexplainable crevices of our minds. The most comfortable position that we have is when we go into the fetal position. And at the same time, each time you go swimming, don't you realize that you have this really strange memory of a pleasure, a comfort, a whole sensation of safety when your body is surrounded by water. These things are inculcated and ingrained in your mind from memories way before you were born. You are actually trying to simulate, or you're trying to remember, okay, feelings that happened when you were in the womb of your mom, of which you were in a fetal position and you were surrounded by water. And that whole idea of comfort and of safety is built around those images and those sensations. From images to feelings, okay, we instinctively react to certain images. We associate certain sights, smells, and sounds to deep-rooted ideas. Sometimes nga, we tend to prejudge people, places, and events because of preconceived notions about them. There are certain types of which you look at a person, and just because that person triggers certain images which are embedded in your mind, you automatically prejudge the person. You automatically assume that a person is of such a character or of such a virtue or vice. So, in order for you to further expand what I explained, okay, in this module, research on the following topics which should enhance, okay, a deeper understanding of this discussion. Try to look for Jung's concept of the collective unconscious and the archetypes. Try to find out what is semiology, what is the science of symbols, and how is the science of symbols associated with mythological and religious narrative. Okay, here are also some more readings which you can just click on the link. Okay, click on the link, press control, then put the arrow there, and then press left key, and then you are into these articles, okay, which are going to be found in the internet, which will give you an even deeper insight into what I just discussed.